Hello, everyone. In this session, I am going to discuss, though briefly, chapter number 9, the money market and monetary policy. So, if you remember in chapter number 7, we talked about fiscal policy, and that is the government approach towards its own expenditures and taxes. And we discussed how we use these fiscal policies, that is, in changes in government expenditures and taxes, to solve the two problems. That is, the problem of unemployment, which we call a recessionary gap, and the problem of inflation, that is what we call inflationary gap. In chapter number 8, we talked about the money creation process. That is how commercial banks create money supply. Uh, When I say create, I mean increase in deposits, that is demand deposits or checking accounts. So we discussed in that chapter that if the commercial banks reserves increase for whatever reason we'll discuss in a moment, then banks will use the excess reserve and lend that excess reserve to other customers and make money. And this creates more demand deposits. So, what we are going to do in this chapter, we try to understand that how Bank of Canada can increase or decrease the money supply in order to impact real sector. When I say real sector, I mean production and employment, or unemployment and inflation. This is what we call monetary policy. So in monetary policy, Bank of Canada either controls money supply or rate of interest, which we'll discuss in this chapter, to solve these two problems that we discussed earlier, that is unemployment and inflation. How Bank of Canada increases the supply of money, of course, by creating more demand deposit. We have already discussed the money creation process. So Bank of Canada uses different monetary tools in order to increase the reserves of the commercial bank. Once commercial banks have more reserves, then the whole process will be active and more checking accounts or demand deposits will be created. Why? Because commercial banks are using those excess reserves and lending that money to other customers. So this is basically the preface or the introduction of this chapter. So if understand, then what I'm trying to basically tell you that in this chapter, first we discuss the money market, because I'm talking about money supply. So we'll discuss money market, how money market works. Money market is similar to product market, similar to labor market. That is, you have a demand for money, you have supply of money, and then we'll calculate equilibrium price of money. And then we try to link this money with other markets, that is product market and foreign exchange market. For example, if money supply increases, how this increase in money supply will impact product market by creating more employment. So this link we want to discuss in this chapter. So I'm going to show you the learning objectives in this chapter. I don't have to, go through or at least read them out. This is on your screen and this is recorded. So you can just read these 6 learning objectives that we are trying to achieve in this session. I'm not sure, maybe we have 2 sessions because the chapter is pretty lengthy. So this is what I said earlier. Can money affect production and employment? We need to analyze the money market in order to answer this question, to see how money can affect production and employment. This is main issue, because in fiscal policy it was government expenditures and taxes only. That is, when government increases own expenditures, aggregate demand shifts to the right. Why? Because in aggregate demand, if you remember, we have consumption plus investment plus government expenditures plus exports minus imports. So I am just targeting directly that variable capital G. But in monetary policy, money supply is not given in that aggregate demand. So what we want to understand, how changes in money supply will impact aggregate demand or aggregate expenditures. So if we want to study money market like any other market, so for example, if we are discussing the market for computers, it's a product market. Then you have on the horizontal axis, you have the supply, quantity supply of computers, and then quantity demand for computers. And then on the vertical axis, you have price of that product, that is computer. Same logic applies here. In the money market, I will take demand for money and supply of money on the horizontal axis and price of money on the vertical axis. Now the issue is, or the question is, what is the price of money? So price of money is the interest rate. So if you go to the bank and borrow money, let's say $100, so basically you are borrowing this money to use. And using this money, $100, you have to pay a price of this $100. Let's say 5%. So it means the price of this $100 is $5. You can use this $100, but you have to return. And then on top of it, you have to pay $5 extra. That is the price of money. So we know that now in the money market, we have price of money, that is interest rate. Now we have to examine first supply of money and then demand for money. If you remember, in chapter number 8, we did talk about money supply, as there were several definitions of money supply, if you remember, M1, M2, M2 plus, M2 plus plus, but we will be sticking to only this narrow definition of money supply, that is currency in circulation, not in the commercial banks tills, right, or drawers, and plus demand deposit or vaults, right, whatever you call it. So this is the supply of money, currency plus demand deposits. And you know that Bank of Canada can influence commercial bank so that commercial bank have more reserves, and therefore these banks will increase demand deposit by lending money. So now this is the step. We first discuss money market. So we are not discussing monetary policy. We are just discussing money market. Once we know how money market works, then I will show you how this money market is related to investment. That is one component, or exports. There are two components in the aggregate demand or aggregate expenditure equation. If you remember, C plus I plus G plus exports minus imports. So I've already discussed the supply of money. That is, we'll only consider this definition, the narrow definition of money supply, M1, supply of money, currency in circulation plus demand deposits at chartered banks only. So I'm not talking about near banks like credit unions and other, loan associations, right? Or mutual fund companies. So I'm just talking about the demand deposit only. Okay. Now, just give me a second. I have one thing here. Yeah, so by loan association, I mean basically, both mortgage and loan associations that are not defined under Bank Act or other trust companies. So we'll be only discussing checking account, that is demand deposit at chartered banks only. we assume, at least in the short run, that the money supply is autonomous with respect to its price. I know that Bank of Canada can increase supply of money or decrease supply of money by changing the reserves of the commercial banks. I know this, but there's no relationship between price of money, that is interest rate, and money supply, at least in the short run. That is, Bank of Canada will not increase or decrease supply of money that depends on the rate of interest. So basically, whenever I say autonomous, autonomous means independent of interest rate. So if I draw a supply curve will be a vertical line like this. So this is the supply curve. Why I said that this supply curve is money supply is autonomous, because it's constant. So the supply of money is constant at any one point in time. I'm not saying that this straight line is fixed forever. So if Bank of Canada wants, and I'm just, since this is in your in this chapter, so I'm discussing, but currently Bank of Canada does not use this policy to control supply of money. We'll discuss in a moment in the same chapter. So Bank of Canada can definitely increase money supply like this. So this is increase in money supply. That is M1 definition of money, but we are writing MS, money supply. Or can decrease also money supply as well. But there's no relationship between money supply and rate of interest. You can see whatever be the rate of interest, money supply is same. And this is, I'm not saying this is always the case, but this is in the short run, it is possible. So we just completed money supply. So money supply is autonomous, independent of interest rate. It's a vertical line. Bank of Canada controls money supply through commercial banks. And we already discussed the money creation process by the commercial banks in the previous chapter, that is chapter number 8. Now we have demand for money. By demand for money, I mean why you need money. We discussed the functions of money, that is medium of exchange and store of value and unit of account. So these were the three main functions of money. So the most important function is medium of exchange. That is, you need money to buy goods and services. That is one reason. So this is the reason why you demand money. So this demand for money is called transactions demand for money. And we call it MD, that is demand for money. And in the superscript or subscript, we call it capital T. T stands for transaction. So this is basically for medium of exchange function. So for example, if you want to buy groceries from Canadian Superstore, suppose, then you need money, right? So you demand money in order to make those purchases. Second, this demand for money will depend on your income and also on the prices. Income means, since I'm talking about for the whole country, not demand for money for Naved or for one specific student. I'm talking about demand for money in the whole economy. So if GDP increases, so suppose people are getting higher income, that is why, because there's more production. So per capita income is increasing. Of course, if you are getting more income, you spend more money. You are not going to, save 100% of them, of the increased income. So you are going to consume more. What do we mean? What do we mean by when I say you consume more? It means you need more money in order to buy those goods and services. That is transaction demand for money, and therefore demand for money will increase with GDP and also with prices as well. So if you go to let's say Walmart 6 months ago, for normal groceries, suppose, this is totally a supposition, right? Suppose 6 months ago it cost you $70. Now it costs you $100. So now you are demanding $100 in order to make those purchases. Why? You need more instead of 70, 100 instead of 70, simply because of inflation, because of increase in price. So prices and income, that is GDP, will determine transaction demand for money. So this is one type of demand for money. This is one reason why people demand money. The second reason is basically the combination of two, but we will ignore the first one. So first reason why you keep money is just for precautions. This is what we call emergency fund. So some people keep 3 months of monthly expenses as a emergency fund. So you are demanding that money, but you are not spending that money buying goods and services. You are also not investing that money. You just keep that money in cash or in checking account so that if you need any emergency, you can withdraw that money. So that is another purpose. But we are not going to include this in our analysis. Why? Because this is a small portion of the total money demand. The second important reason why we demand money is because of investment purposes. That is what we call a store of value function. So you keep money in order to earn more money. This is the reason you are demanding money. But there's one confusion of this demand for money. So we call it asset demand for money. That is, you are demanding money just for investment purposes, not for transaction purposes. This asset demand for money depends on interest rates. So for example, if any commercial bank is giving you 5% interest on your savings and you deposit it for a year, $5,000, it means your demand for that $5,000 has gone down because you have already invested. So understand this. So if you are, for example, if I say that my demand is $5,000 for investment, it means I haven't invested yet. The moment I invested, it will decrease. So asset demand for money, the money that you keep in the form of cash or checking account and you haven't invested. So if interest rates are very low, then people tend to demand more money in the form of asset. So they are not investing, they just keep in the liquid form. But if interest increases, then they will reduce that demand and invest. Okay. How we are going to draw these three diagrams. Why I said three? First, the transaction demand for money. Second, the asset demand for money. And then we add these two curves to get total demand for money. So this is the transactions demand for money. Why I have drawn a vertical line? Because notice I have taken rate of interest on the vertical axis, that is the price of money. So transaction demand for money has nothing to do with interest rate. That is why it is a fixed number. Why? If you go to any grocery store and if you want to buy tomatoes, are you going to Google first that what is the interest policy rate of Bank of Canada, and then you make a decision whether you buy 1 or 2 pounds of tomatoes? No, because it has nothing to do with your transaction demand for money. Yes, you will be very concerned about your income and about the price of tomatoes. So if you see that the price of if you see very high price for that product, you might not buy. So you might not demand money for buying tomatoes. But for interest rate, it is independent. So money demand, transactions demand for money is autonomous as far as the rate of interest is concerned. And that is why I have drawn a vertical line like money supply. This is the asset demand for money. It's a downward sloping line. Why? Because I told you that your demand for money will depend on the rate of interest. Let me read this diagram or this straight line and you will understand. Suppose if rate of interest is R2, and from this diagram I can safely say that it is lower than at least R1. So I'm assuming that interest rate is very low. See what is happening. People are demanding this much of money. So they are not investing. They just keep their money idle. They are not earning anything. Why? Because interest rate is very low. But when interest rate increases to here, they invested this much amount. So the demand would be only this much. Similarly, suppose if interest rate is very high, then it is possible that their demand is zero. They invested all that money in interest generating activities, whether in mutual funds or any type of investment. But just to make the analysis simple, I can't consider all different types of investments. Then the analysis would be very difficult. So what we are going to assume that suppose the only option for investment is buying bonds. So if you want to invest, you can invest in bond. That is, you purchase bonds. So if the rate of return is higher, you are going to buy more bonds. If the rate of interest is lower, you are going to buy less bonds. Definitely, right? Now, but this is asset demand for money, and the previous diagram was transactions demand for money. So I'll just add these two curves. When I add these two curves, so you will have this money demand curve. Now, from money demand curve, notice that I just wrote MD, no MDT or no MDA, asset or transactions. So this is total demand curve. Oh, I'm sorry. It's total demand curve. Now, notice one thing, what I have done actually, this is asset demand for money. Sorry. This is asset demand for money. So I shifted this asset demand for money curve exact same rightward by this amount, by the amount of transaction demand for money. So the total demand for money curve has the same slope as demand for asset or asset demand for money, but it is slightly to the right by the amount of transaction demand. So the gap between asset demand and total demand, that is gap between these two, will always be equal to transaction demand for money. Now, once I have drawn money supply and then total money demand by adding transactions demand for money and asset demand for money, then I can draw both these two curves together like this. So I have drawn money demand curve. You can see it's a downward sloping line. This demand curve includes both transactions and asset demand for money. And we have a vertical line money supply curve. So the equilibrium interest rate is this R1. This R1, sorry, and this is the equilibrium quantity. That is in the whole country, Q1 dollars are demanded by different consumers, everyone in the country, and this is also the supply of money. So everything is in equilibrium, and this is the interest rate, that is R1. Now we want to understand what would happen. Why we are studying this market? Because we will use this market in the later part of the same chapter, that is chapter number 9. This is the reason why we are doing this. So suppose if rate of interest is higher than equilibrium rate of interest, what would happen? Okay, what would happen? So you can see it's already mentioned on the slide as well. You have surplus. What is the meaning of surplus? Surplus means in the country we have more money supply, but people are not demanding. That is, banks, commercial banks have more reserves, but people are not, willing to demand that money. Why? Because the interest rate is very high, R3. If interest rate is low, then you can see people demand more money, but the supply is only this one, that is Q1. So there's a shortage. So we have surplus of money, we have shortage of money. Okay. Or let me put this way so that you understand. By surplus, don't include the discussion of commercial banks. That would complicate the analysis. Just do this. If money supply is greater than money demand, it means that whatever money you have, you don't need that money for transaction purposes or other asset purposes. What are you going to do? Okay. And suppose if there's a shortage, that is, you have money that is less than what you need. So what will you do? So let's answer these two questions. Number one. So how the money market adjusts? Money market adjusts to a surplus or a shortage through bond yields. Now I'll discuss bond market as well and bond yields as well. So let's see this. Remember, and this is the assumption that people can hold wealth as either money or bonds. I told you earlier that you do have other investment alternatives, but we are assuming that you are going to invest only, or we are going to invest only in bonds. If we have surplus of money, that is this surplus of money, what would happen? People buy bonds. Why they buy bonds? Because they have more money and the demand is less. They don't want to keep cash even for investment purposes in their accounts. They want to invest because they have extra money, and therefore people would buy bonds. That is, invest in bonds. They could have bought, mutual funds or invest in stocks or buy real estate, whatever. But we are assuming here that these people will buy bonds. If there's a shortage, people sell bonds because demand is more than supply. They need money. And if you have already invested in your bonds, just sell your bonds in the secondary market, in the bond market. Not necessarily at the same price that you bought that for, but you can definitely sell either at a higher price or even lower price as well. We'll discuss in a moment. So now, I told you that if there is, let me go back here. I told you if there is a disequilibrium, that is either if you have surplus or shortage, what would happen? This market will adjust itself, right, and move towards R1 rate of interest, that is equilibrium rate of interest. What is the process, right? Or what is that adjustment process? So in order to understand adjustment process, you have to understand how to calculate bond yields. So when you sell bonds or when you buy bonds, what would happen in the bond market? What would happen to the price of the bond? And what would happen to the rate of return or rate of interest? So let's see this. So I'm talking about bond yields, but let me give you brief information about bonds. So these are basically loans for a set period of time. So you are actually giving loans. Okay. For example, if you're buying government bonds, so you are giving, you are lending money to government for a specific time period. So if the maturity of that bond is 1 year, then after 1 year, you just take that bond and get your money back, plus the interest on that bond. Issued by corporations, banks, and various levels of government. So I gave you the example of government bonds, but you do have banks and other bonds issued by different banks and other corporations as well. Of course, you will earn slightly lower rate of return on government bonds because they are more secure compared to other private bonds. So private and public bonds have a set face value. So whenever you buy a bond, so bond has a fixed face value that is printed on the bond. So suppose if it says, this is, I'm sorry, hold on. Suppose it says, let's assume this is just a number, $5,000. So I say that the face value of this bond is $5,000. Why I'm emphasizing this on this face value? Because when you buy and sell these bonds in the secondary market, not from the original issuer, then 5,000 is not the price, not necessarily the price. You can buy this bond for 5,500. You can also buy the same bond for 4,500. But after 1 year, when you redeem this bond, you will get the same face value that is printed on the bond. It does not matter how much you paid um, to 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 get this bond, right? Doesn't matter. So, for example, if I bought this bond in the secondary market for $7,000, then after 1 year, and if the maturity is after 1 year, then when I take this bond and redeem this bond, then I will get 5,000, although I paid 7,000 for this bond. Then pay a fixed rate of interest that is called coupon rate. So coupon rate is also printed on the bond. So suppose if it says that coupon rate, let's say, is 4%. This is fixed. So it doesn't matter. For example, if you buy this bond for $10,000, you are not going to get 4% of $10,000. This is not the meaning of this 4%. 4% is calculated on this face value, 4% of $5,000. This rate is called coupon rate because on the coupon. Or it's not on the coupon, earlier when you buy bonds, so there were coupons attached for example, if it's a 5-year maturity bond, then every year you have one coupon attached. You just detach that coupon and redeem the amount, that is coupon rate. So for example, if the maturity is 5 years, if these are 5 coupons attached and it says 4%, so every year you just tear this one coupon and redeem this and get $200. Why $200? Because 4% of 5,000 is 200, and it's always going to be 200 every year. So you are getting every year 2,000, and the fifth year you go and you get $5,200. That is 5,000 is your principal amount and 200 is your coupon rate. Now, can be bought and sold in the market. By in the market, I mean you can sell and buy bonds not at the face value price, but any price. Okay. So now we are going to calculate. So once we have this basic concept of bonds, now we are in a position to calculate what we call bond yields or rate of return. And this is synonymous to rate of interest as well. So this is how you calculate rate of return. First, coupon interest. Remember, it says coupon interest. It doesn't say coupon interest rate. So I'm not writing 4% here. I'm writing a number in dollars. So the 4% of 5,000 is $200. So coupon interest is $200. That is after the maturity. After if it is, just assume that's for 1 year. Then after 1 year, you will get $200. And then plus minus change in bond price. So you can buy a bond at a lower price, lower than the face value, or you can buy bond at a higher price, higher than the face value. It all depends on the market conditions. Suppose if everyone wants to sell their bonds, they can't sell, so they have to lower their prices, even lower than the face value. If everyone is buying bonds, the price of bond will increase according to demand and supply forces, that is according to market forces. So I've given you 3 examples here, and you can see these 3 examples. Number 1, suppose, and the assumption is the same that I just mentioned in the previous slide, that we have a bond of face value of $5,000 and the rate of coupon rate is 4%. So suppose if I buy the same 5,000 face value bond at 4% coupon rate, I paid 4,700 only. Then my return on this investment is not 4%. 4% is the coupon rate that I earn on 5,000 I haven't paid $5,000. I paid only $4,700. So how we are going to calculate my return? This is the rule or formula, not rule. So this is $200. What is this $200? So when I redeem this bond, which is a face value of 5,000, I will get $200 for sure, because coupon rate is 4%, face value is 5,000, I get $200. But well, after 1 year, I will also get $5,000, the face value. I will get that $5,000 as well. But I've already paid 4,700. So what is my gain on that redemption? So my net gain would be 300. Why 300? Because 5,000 minus 4,700 is 300. So I'm also getting 300 extra dollars because I bought this bond for 4,700 and then redeem at 5,000. So I get 300. That is plus sign. So we also get this. And what is my total investment? My initial investment was not 5,000, only 4,700. So I am, after 1 year, I will make $500 out of 4,700. I can easily calculate percentage by multiply by 100 and see I am earning actually, or I earn actually 10.64% return after 1 year. Now, notice if price is, okay, forget about this. You just see this. I'm just discussing this. Suppose if I buy this bond at a price higher than the face value, because face value was 5,000. Now I paid 5,100. What would happen? After 1 year, I will still get this $200. That is coupon interest. And then I'm losing $100 because I will get only 5,000 at the time of redemption, but I paid actually 5,100. So I'm losing 100. So 200 minus 100 divided by, this is the price that I paid, 5,100 times multiply times 100, I will get 1.96% return, which is even lower than the coupon rate, that is 4%. What I'm trying to show you only one thing. First thing, of course, that you should know how to calculate bond yields or rate of return. What I'm trying to show you is there is an inverse or negative relationship between bond price and rate of return. You can see if bond price increases from 4,700 to 5,100, look at here what is happening. The rate of return is decreasing. So even if you don't understand, just remember this, that price of bonds and rate of return on them, these two variables are inversely related. So if price of bond increases, return on bond will decrease. Definitely, because you're paying higher price and coupon rate is fixed. So definitely in percentage now, you will earn lower percentage. Once you know, which I've already written here, if you read here, it says the higher the purchase price of a bond, the lower the yield. The lower the purchase price, the higher the yield. So they are inversely related. So now see what is happening here. If there is a surplus, so if there is a surplus, that is, we are here. If there is a surplus, what would happen? If you have surplus, people buy bonds. Why? Because they have extra money. So they invest. When everyone is buying bonds in the bond market, bonds. Why? Because they have extra money. So they invest. When everyone is buying bonds in the bond market, what would happen? The price of bond will increase. So bond prices rise. And it means fall in bond yields and interest rate. Bond yields means rate of return, that is interest rate. So notice what is happening. When there's a surplus, people will buy bonds, price of bond will increase, and rate of interest or rate of return will decrease. So rate of interest will decrease, and you will eventually come back to this point. The reverse is also true, exactly the same way, but in opposite direction. I've already mentioned here. So if you have if you have a shortage, if that is, people need more money. So people will have to sell their investments, that is bonds. Bond prices fall. Everyone is selling. Rise in bond yield. When price falls, bond yields increase, and interest rates both. So rates increase until there's no more shortage. So rate of interest will increase and eventually reach to this equilibrium point. Okay. So that is all as far as money market is concerned. So let me quickly summarize what we just talked about. So we started with the autonomous money supply. Then we talked about two types of, technically two, sorry, but we just three, but just stick to two. That is transaction demand for money, asset demand for money. We draw these two diagrams and calculate the equilibrium rate of interest. Then I showed you that if there's a surplus in the money market, then people will buy more bonds. Price of bond will increase, interest rate will decrease, and therefore interest rate will fall back from R3 to R1. Similarly, if there's a shortage, so this is basically the adjustment process. If there's a shortage, people will sell their bonds. People, sell their bonds, and bond prices fall. When bond prices falls, interest rate or rate of return or bond yields will increase, and will increase from R2, and the process will continue until interest rate reaches exactly at R1. Now, so this is the money market. When we started this chapter, I said that Bank of Canada, by controlling money supply, can also solve the problem of unemployment and inflation. So now we are going to see, after discussing this money market, that how an increase in money supply. So suppose Bank of Canada shifts this aggregate supply curve to the right like this, MS prime, in this fashion, right? By increasing the reserves of commercial bank. So if money supply increases, how this increase in money supply will impact real sector of the economy, that is, impact production, aggregate demand, aggregate expenditures, unemployment, all these factors. So first, Bank of Canada has two options. Number one, the example that I just gave you, that if Bank of Canada increases, or any central bank increases the money supply to control the problem of unemployment or solve the problem of unemployment and inflation. This is what we call money supply targeting, or targeting money supply. That is, Bank of Canada is now targeting money supply, controls money supply. So that is one option. The second option for Bank of Canada is, rather than controlling money supply, Bank of Canada can directly control this interest rate directly, and then solve the problem of inflation. So first we start with targeting money supply, and then we go to targeting interest rate. So let's go to first targeting the money supply. So I told you that different markets, such as money market, we just discussed, product market, and foreign exchange market, all these three markets are linked. The changes in the money market indirectly affects the product market, which we'll discuss in a moment. So I know if money supply increases, rate of interest decreases, this change will impact product market as well, that is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So if you notice here, the change, or the agent of change here, is the central bank, in our case Bank of Canada, which has a degree of control over the supply of money, and can thus affect interest rates. So understand, don't worry. Let me go. So now let's see the Keynesian monetary policy. What we are going to do in this, how do I say, under this policy, Bank of Canada actually increases or decreases money supply in order to solve these problems that are on your screen: controlling inflation, achieving full employment, stimulating economic growth. Bank of Canada plays a major role in the monetary policy. Remember, in fiscal policy, federal government was responsible. So federal government will decide its own expenditures and taxes in order to solve the problem of a recessionary or inflationary gap. Here we are talking about central bank, that is Bank of Canada. So in this first scenario, that is targeting the money supply, according to Keynesian monetary policy, this group of economists, or this view, believes that central bank, that is Bank of Canada, can increase or decrease money supply and control inflation and unemployment. How? Let's see this. So first we will understand how Bank of Canada increases the supply of money. Oh, I think this is not given here. Oh, yeah, here it is. So, sorry. So there are two types of monetary policy. Remember, we did talk about in chapter number 7 as well, expansionary fiscal policy and contractionary fiscal policy. Now we have expansionary monetary policy and contractionary monetary policy. So let me first read this out first, and then we discuss. So Bank of Canada increases the amount of cash reserves held by commercial banks. So Bank of Canada will increase the reserves of commercial banks. How? We'll discuss in a moment. Because I can also increase the reserves of commercial bank by depositing $1,000 in my checking account. Bank's reserve will increase. But how Bank of Canada will do this? The excess reserve will be loaned out, and through the money multiplier process we discussed in chapter number 8, will increase loans and demand deposits, the main portion of M1 supply of money, that is currency in circulation plus demand deposit. So this is how Bank of Canada will increase the supply of money. Contractionary monetary policy, we also call it tight money policy. Expansionary monetary policy is called easy money policy. Easy money policy means Bank of Canada is increasing the money supply. So people have access to more money. Tight money policy means Bank of Canada is restricting the money supply. So it's difficult for you to borrow money from banks. So Bank of Canada decreases the amount of cash reserves held by the commercial bank. Credit becomes harder to obtain and more expensive. This policy implies the opposite, that is money supply will decrease. Now, how Bank of Canada will actually increase or decrease the reserves of commercial banks? So there are two important tools. One is called open market operations. I don't know what to explain, so I have to read this out and you'll understand. Buying and selling securities, that is short-term bonds, by the Bank of Canada in the open market. So if the Bank of Canada buys government bonds in the second-hand bond market, the seller can be anyone, even I can sell. So the seller who receive a check from the Bank of Canada, the seller will then deposit this check in the seller's bank account. The reserves of the commercial bank will loan out. It will lead to a multiple expansion of money. So for example, if I sell my bond to Bank of Canada in the secondary market, I have more cash. And where I am going to keep that cash? I deposit. The moment I deposit in the bank reserve will increase, and commercial bank will use your money after keeping their target reserve with them in their vaults. The remaining will be loaned out, and therefore there will be a creation of more demand deposits. So the whole process will take place and the supply of money will increase. So that is one method, that is called open market operations, buying and selling securities, particularly short-term bonds. Second, switching government deposits. So government also has account with the Bank of Canada. So Bank of Canada decreases the money supply with the approval of the finance minister by transferring some of the government's deposits from the commercial bank to the Bank of Canada. So Bank of Canada can withdraw money from commercial bank. then the reserve of commercial bank will decrease. Similarly, Bank of Canada also can transfer some of the government deposits to the commercial bank, increasing commercial bank's reserves, and therefore money supply will increase. Okay. Now, once you understand that Bank of Canada using open market operation and switching government deposits can increase or decrease money supply. Now, once we know that Bank of Canada can increase or decrease money supply, now understand what is Keynesian expansionary monetary policy. So according to Keynesian economists, according to this group, according to this view, if we have, suppose, unemployment in the country, so in the fiscal policy, these economists suggest that federal government should increase, or all types of government should increase their expenditures and lower taxes. That was the policy. In the monetary policy, if you have unemployment in the country, this group suggests that central bank, that is Bank of Canada, should increase the money supply. And you know, when money supply increases, that is shifts to the right, then interest rate will decrease. And a decrease in interest rate will increase investment. Why? Because if investors know that they can borrow money at a lower interest rate, then their profit margin will increase. Because suppose if the return on their own investment is higher than what they are paying in interest to those banks, they would rather borrow money. So investment will increase. That is, when investment interest rate decreases, investment will increase. And you know that investment is a part of aggregate expenditure and aggregate demand as well. If you remember aggregate expenditures, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So this investment is increasing through what? Through expansion in money supply via, of course, indirectly, because there's no money supply in this equation, aggregate expenditures equation. But money supply is impacting interest rate via, or investment, sorry, via interest rate. So interest rate is the only factor that connects both markets, money market and product market. So the result is a multiplied impact on real GDP and a higher price level. So there will be no unemployment in the country. Why not I show you a diagram that we also drew in chapter number 7. So these are the 4 diagrams. So we start, because you know, since money market is not directly related to product market, so we have some connectors. So we started from here. Let's say we start from here. This is money market. You can see money supply increases like this. Okay, let me, reduce my font size. 2 is fine. Yeah. And let me change the color so that's visible. Okay. So see, this is the first diagram, that is money market. What is happening? According to Keynesian analysis, if there's unemployment in the country, then Bank of Canada should increase money supply. Notice what happens. When money supply increases, rate of interest decreases. This decrease in rate of interest will impact this investment. So now we are moving to investment sector. Why? Because rate of interest is here and rate of interest is also here. So these are two common things, right? So when rate of interest decreases, I know investment will increase. When investment will increase, then there are 2 diagrams. They are the same, exact the same. It's totally up to you which diagram you use. They should have drawn aggregate supply, but anyways, so you can see that aggregate expenditure will shift upward. More expenditures. Why? Because investment increases. Expenditures are C plus I plus G. So I increases, whole curve shifts upward. So you can see the production is, suppose at this level you have full employment. And this was the actual equilibrium. So we have a recessionary gap here. And this recessionary gap can be eliminated by shifting the aggregate expenditures curve upward. And you can shift this by increasing money supply. Same here with the, so suppose, let me draw here so that you know what I'm talking about. Suppose this is aggregate supply. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Because I have to show the actual actually, let me erase this. Because it's a slightly, I don't know, I think it's difficult to show here, but okay, hold on, just give me a sec, right? I'm telling you what to do. So suppose, okay, yeah, suppose this. Oh, that was correct, I believe, right? Doesn't matter. So suppose this is aggregate supply. This is the equilibrium. So this is the equilibrium point. Forget about this. This is equilibrium. And this is full employment. So I draw a straight line like this. This is full employment. You can see this is a recessionary gap. If you want to eliminate this recessionary gap, you have to shift the aggregate demand to the right. How much? So that it will intersect here. And we shifted aggregate demand gap to the right. By what? By increasing investment. But investment increases because of decrease in rate of interest. And rate of interest decreases because of increase in money supply. And this is controlled by Bank of Canada. So this is expansionary fiscal policy. But notice one thing. There's one problem with this expansionary fiscal policy. The problem is that we have unemployment in the country. But if you shift the aggregate, let me write here. If you shift the aggregate demand curve to the right, earlier you were here. So this was the price. Now this is the price. So we have some inflation in the country as well. That is the main problem, that if you try to tackle the problem of unemployment, you will see inflation in the country, okay? Which is, I believe, is given here. The result is a multiplier impact of real GDP and a higher price level. So this is a problem. Again, I have given you the same analysis, but I'm not going to give you the same for contractionary monetary policy. You have to do it your own. So this is easy to understand, I believe, that money supply increases because of Bank of Canada. So Bank of Canada increases money supply. Let's assume through open market operation or switching government deposits. Then we have surplus of money. Then we purchase bond. Then price of bond increase, then rate of interest decrease. So see, this I skipped previously. So why, when money supply increases, interest rate decreases? This is the whole process which we have already discussed. That when you have surplus of money, everyone will buy bond. Price of bond everyone will buy bond. The price of bond will increase, and when price of bond will increase, rate of interest will decrease. When rate of interest decreases, investment will increase and real GDP will increase because you are shifting aggregate demand curve to the right. This is the curve which you have already seen earlier. So you have a recessionary gap situation, and I want to use expansionary monetary policy. So I don't know if I have here or not. Yes. So see, I just shifted the aggregate demand curve to the right, and the gap is closed. But remember one thing, in chapter 7, we also shifted the aggregate demand curve to the right, the same way, exact same way. But at that time, we used a different policy, that is fiscal policy. We shifted aggregate demand curve in chapter 7 by increasing government expenditures or decreasing taxes. Here we are also shifting the aggregate demand curve to the right, but not using government expenditures or taxes, but increasing money supply. That is why we call it monetary policy. Okay. I don't have to go through the contractionary monetary policy exactly the same, but in opposite direction. That when Bank of Canada decreases the supply of money, interest rate will increase, investment will decrease, aggregate demand curve shifts to the left, aggregate expenditures curve should shift downward, and the problem is solved. I think the diagram is also given the same diagram exactly in opposite direction. So this time I shifted money supply from M1 to M2 totally in opposite direction to the left. Investment will decrease, aggregate expenditures curve shift downward, aggregate demand curve shifts to the left instead of right in the expansionary monetary policy case. This is exactly the same diagram, but with inflationary gap, because you can see full employment potential GDP is is less than equilibrium GDP. So we have inflationary gap. How we are going to solve this problem? By shifting the aggregate demand curve to the left like this, so that you have here. But this shift in aggregate demand curve is by decreasing the supply of money, which is given here. Okay. So this is what we call a Keynesian transmission process. Because why we are calling transmission? Because we are actually moving from one market to another, from money market to product market through interest rate. So Keynesian view of how changes in money affect or transmit to the real variables in the economy. The interest rate provides the link between the money market and the goods market, which we have already discussed. Now, criticisms of Keynesian monetary policy. The, now, criticisms of Keynesian monetary policy. The twin goals of full employment and stable prices are incompatible. That is the problem. And I showed you earlier that if you try to solve the problem of unemployment, you are going to have inflation. So, may not be possible to achieve them together. That's not possible. The best a central bank can do is achieve a delicate balance between the two without ever attaining either goal. So what then Bank of Canada should do actually, that Bank of Canada should accept a certain level of inflation and certain level of unemployment. You cannot eliminate both at the same time. That is the problem. So this is, okay, let me, I think, stop here. This is too much for one session. And then in the second session, I'm going to discuss the another view for monetary policy that is targeting money supply. So according to this view says that Bank of Canada should not increase or decrease money supply by looking at the problem. That is, when there's unemployment in the country or inflation in the country, then you increase or decrease money supply with discretion. This group is against Keynesian school of thought, and this group believes that Bank of Canada should fix the increase in money supply every year. For example, that the Bank of Canada should increase every year 3% increase in money supply. So it should be a rule. It's not discretionary that Bank of Canada will decide how much money supply to increase or how much money to supply to increase in order to solve the problem of unemployment or inflation. According to the other group, they believe the group believes that Bank of Canada should increase its money supply at a constant rate. So we'll discuss that view, and then in the last part of this chapter, we will discuss the interest rate targeting. Instead of money supply targeting, we will discuss interest rate targeting. So thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.